Bueno, ahora sí que empezamos, ¿eh? Las que no les haya tocado nada, luego que cuando acabe todo que me digan, ¿vale? A ver si compensamos en enero, ¿vale? Pero muchas gracias. Y así hemos celebrado un poquito la Navidad porque es la última sesión de STEM Talengel de este año. Os agradezco a todas y a todos los que estáis aquí y os voy a presentar a nuestra chica masterclass, que es Leslea. ¿Ven? Ella es experta en genética vinculada a los dientes. Es una investigadora que forma parte del grupo de Antropología Dental del equipo en el Centro Nacional de Investigación sobre la Evolución Humana, que está aquí al lado. Ella es especialista también en proteómica, centrada en proteínas de los fósiles. Yo creo que lo más interesante es que ella os empiece a contar. Ya sabéis que como ella apenas lleva un año en España, pues para que podáis quedaros con todos los matices de lo que ella os puede contar, porque a mí no os lo va a decir, pero es de la mejor en su campo. Ya ha venido desde Estados Unidos y la verdad es que es un honor que nos acompañe hoy.
Sí, para mí.
Y yo creo que os va a encantar porque es muy difícil hacer todo lo que haya hecho siendo tan joven, porque lleva ya mucha tralla detrás, muchas excavaciones, muchas investigaciones. Y nada, pues adelante, cuando quieras. Muchas gracias.
Gracias. Forgive me, I'm going to speak in English. Vivo en Burgos solo un año y medio y estoy aprendiendo español poco a poco. Gracias por tu paciencia con mi inglés. So if I speak slowly, is this good? Yes. I've been told you have perfect English, so thank you. And also, thank you for coming. It's really nice to spend some time with you today. This is not something I have ever been asked to do before, to talk about my journey, my career journey. So I'm a little nervous. Estoy un poco nervioso. So how many of you are interested, because you have STEM, how many of you are interested in the science part of STEM? Yo también. Y the technology? And engineering? Un poco. And mathematics? Oh, all right. We have people from all of it. So nice to have you here. So I am a biologist, a paleontologist, and since I study human evolution, there is some humanities, some archaeology, some social science as well. So I was asked to talk about, first, who I am and what I do, and then to offer some advice. So first, who I am. Right now, I am an investigadora de Antropología Dental at the CENIEH, right next door. I have the best office view in the world because this is my view, a picture from my window. I almost feel guilty. It's a wonderful place to think and to imagine what other new projects to do and how to solve the problems that we have and the ones we have today. I recently was awarded an advanced grant from the European Research Council. So I have now funding for a research team for 5 years. So I have 3 postdocs and a project manager now, and we'll be hiring 4 other scientists to join us soon, in about 6 months. I have been a professor of biology at the University of California in Berkeley. I was there for about 16, 17 years before I decided to come here. And I will talk a little bit about why I decided to do that later in my presentation. And I'm also the president-elect of the American Association of Biological Anthropologists, which might seem strange because I do not live in the Americas, but I think the discipline is so international, and I think having a perspective coming from Spain brings a nice element to that. And also, I have spent so many years in the United States. I still feel an obligation to be a part of that community for a little bit longer. So I study the dentition, when I was your age. How old are you? ¿Cuántos años? 16, 15, 14, any 17? 18? All right, so any 13? No. Mi hija está aquí y tiene 11 años. So I think you win the prize for the youngest. But she does not like science, she thinks. So I was not interested at all in science when I was your age. I think I liked biology class, but it was nothing special. I wanted to be in the humanities, so I didn't care about teeth. But over the years, I then learned just how fascinating teeth are, because they can tell you things about organisms. What can you learn from teeth? Can you tell me something? Their age, exactly. So from eruption and what teeth they have. Yeah, speak up in the back. See. Their diet, what kind of food they eat. ¿Algo más? Their gender, exactly. From some animals, you can tell from the size of their teeth. Yes. Another time? The illnesses, exactly. Yeah, you can see the health from teeth as well. So when I came into the science of human evolution, I knew that we were starting to learn how genes influence how teeth are made, how they influence the variation, how you make a tooth. And I wanted to take that knowledge and expand it and apply it to fossils. So for more than 20 years, I've been using quantitative genetics. Do you know Mendel, Gregor Mendel and the pea plants? And he was, is that me, feedback? And he was looking at how flower color was inherited through pea plants, or if the peas were wrinkled or smooth. So this is quantitative genetics, and this is the type of genetics that I first brought to this question, was looking at how dental variation is inherited through family pedigrees. And what that enabled us to do was to then think about variation in the dentition from the way the genome, from the way genetics is influencing it, rather than the way we just see it with our eyes. So when I look at this, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I see, 18 teeth, and they all look like separate structures in the mouth. But what we learned from our genetic analyses is that that's not the case, is that these 3 teeth, for example, the length of them is all influenced by the same set of genes. So as the length of this changes, this one changes too, and this one changes as well, but not because they are 3 separate organs, but because they're just changing from one genetic mutation. And it changes all 3 at the same time. And this has changed the way that we think about the evolution of teeth. And so one of our synthesis papers, so pulling many years of research together and applying it to the fossil record, we found that the genes involved in the changes in the dentition were selected on. They were really important in the evolution of our lineage, the evolution of primates more broadly. So if you go back to about 20 million years ago, there were a lot of apes. And so apes are like chimpanzees, gorillas, although they had not evolved yet. So it was apes long before them. And there were very, very few monkeys. So monkeys are like the baboons, vervet monkeys, macaques. But if you look at them today, you have just a few apes. And aside from our own species, they're all quite rare and possibly going extinct soon, but there are lots and lots of monkeys. So this time period when this shifted was really important, and especially important also for our own evolution, because this is when you see the very beginning of human evolution happening. And we know from the research that my group has done, is that the genes involved in the dentition were selected on during this interval in both of these lineages, so changing their niches. So we don't actually know yet what those genes are. We're still figuring that part out. But while we were doing this research, we kept finding little pieces of information that the genes that are influencing dental variation are actually influencing other parts of the body, which at first I ignored because it just made my work more complicated. But the research we're doing now is picking up those pieces and saying, actually, those are really interesting. What more can we learn about the rest of the body from the genetics on the teeth? And so, for example, I want to give you 3 examples of these other effects that we found. When we looked at the width, this dimension of the molar teeth are these here. So this is the front of your mouth, and this is the back on your top jaw. When we looked just at that width, we found that variation in how wide that tooth is, about 10% of that variation is due to the same genes that determine how tall you are. So then you're looking at, if you have selection for height, you're going to have an increase in the width of the molar as well. So we were also looking at other animals at the same time that we were studying humans, and the baboon research that went into this as well. And we observed that in this group, these callitrichids, they're a type of monkey in South America, and they do not have that third molar. So most primates have 3 molars, but they don't. And so we were testing hypotheses about why that might be. And we started to reject all of the hypotheses that had been proposed. And so thinking about, well, what's an alternative hypothesis? If we're rejecting all the ones that currently exist, what might be an explanation? So we started to think it might be related to the genetic effects that we were finding in the molars. But then we noticed for these monkeys, they all twin, so they have twins. Instead of humans and chimpanzees, gorillas, usually we have just one baby at a time. Sometimes we twin, sometimes have triplets, but it's rare, it's less common. But for these monkeys, they always have twins. And they always have just 2 molars. So what we hypothesized was that during the embryological development, during gestation, during pregnancy, that the growth rate that slows down in order to accommodate having twins, that perhaps this slows down the development of the teeth, and so they don't have the 3rd molar because that gestational growth rate, the prenatal growth rate, was slower. And there was one piece of anecdotal evidence that suggested we were right, and this was that there is one species of callitrichid monkey that does not twin. How many molars do you think they have? Excellent. Yes, they had 3. So we pursued this question. And so Tesla Munson is the lead of this study. And so she looked at our trait for the molars, and she looked at prenatal growth rates, and across all of these different extant primates found that there is this relationship. It's not a linear relationship, but it is statistically significant. So then we applied that to fossils. Fossils are all the ones that are open, the open symbols. And then we were able to predict when you start to see a human-like prenatal growth rate, because we have the fastest growth rate of all primates, and it's unusual. So when did that evolve? And based on this study, we think that evolved maybe around 700 to 500,000 years ago, so not that long ago in evolutionary time. So now we have evidence showing that tooth size is related to height. We have evidence showing that tooth size may also seems to be telling us something about prenatal growth rates. But there's one more piece of evidence I want to share with you, and this relates to your incisors. So, okay, take your tongue and run it against your teeth, the back of your teeth and the front of your mouth. Is it smooth? Is it rough? Or not rough, but is there topography to it? There's variation in the shape on the back of the incisors. Now, we know that there is a gene that is responsible for much of the variation in the shape on the back of your incisors. And so this is what you're feeling. Either it's very smooth or rough like this, and we can score this. This is one of the traits that dental anthropologists are really interested in, although there are about 40 others that we spend a lot of time worrying about. So there is a gene that influences this, and if you have one copy of the gene, you'll have expression that's about halfway in between, and if you have 2 copies, you'll have expression that is over on this end of that range of variation on that distribution. So that gene does other things as well. We found this gene, EDAR, V370A, this is the variant, the allele of that it also influences breast density. This is the proportion between fibrous tissue and adipose tissue in breasts. And this is a risk factor for breast cancer. And we think that it may also be having an influence on the transfer of nutrients from mom to baby through breast milk. Because we know that this allele of this gene that influences breast density, that it experienced very strong selection in a population of humans about 20,000 years ago, a population that was living way up north here in an area called Beringia. So this is Russia and China and the United States and Canada. And so this 20,000 years ago, when sea level was much lower, because this was the last glacial maximum, there was a big landmass, and it was a refuge, a refugium for many plants and animals and people. And a population living there experienced really strong selection on this variant of the EDAR gene. So we think that because the vitamin D is so low, the ability to make vitamin D is so low this far north, that this variant may be involved in the transfer of vitamin D between mom and baby. So teeth can tell us all of these things. So what more might there be? What else can dental variation tell us about the rest of our biology and how it evolved? And this is the question that motivates our new ERC grant that we'll be working on for the next 5 years. So hopefully I can come back and tell you all more of what we have discovered while we work on this. So how did I get here, and what advice might I be able to offer you? So I pulled together some pieces of information. So over the years, I've done the genetics research, and the quantitative genetics is now leading into the proteomics research that we are developing at CENIEH these days. But I've also done a lot of field work, because as I mentioned, I always wanted to apply what we were learning in the genetics to the fossils. So we had that time dimension to add to our study of biology. So I've spent a lot of time in the field. And in many ways, fieldwork is like a laboratory for life. Many of the lessons I have learned in the field, I have found really useful for other parts of my life. So I'll tell you some stories and lessons I have learned that I think maybe will help you or might be relevant for you as well. So first off, I come from this part of the world, North America, a very small state that is called West Virginia, that's famous for coal mining and being very poor. So I come from a place that looks like this, and you can see this mining in the background. And women were always supposed to be quiet and follow men. And so that's what comes more naturally to me, and I have, for all of my life, had to find, from my adult life, have found that I have to deliberately push against all of my upbringing. So I don't think you have that here. I find very strong women in Spain and in Burgos in particular. So you have an advantage that I think you should be very grateful for in that regard. So one of the lessons I have learned from my childhood, looking back, was that you should always look for the good luck in your situation. So rather than focusing on the things that are not perfect, look for what you have that is good luck and take advantage of it. And so for me, I was able to go to a really good university, and I learned a lot of things about how the world works that was really fortunate for me, because not many of my classmates had the opportunity to go to college. So after college, I got a job at National Geographic. So this is the building, this is where the magazine is, this is where they did all the television. So this job was fabulous. I worked for two of the people who edit the beautiful, beautiful photographs. So this meant that I spent every day sitting in a cubicle area with other assistants, and we helped the editors take care of the photographs, because at this point they were all still those 35mm slides. Everything is digital now. But then I kept track of them. So all of the photographers who came in, they would hang out with us. Also because there were 5 young women, and they were usually older guys. So they loved to come and hang out with us because we were like, oh, what a great story. But it was great. I got exposed to so many new people, and I was able to make connections with people who helped me build my career. But how did I get this job? So one day, I had been sending my CV, my resume, to National Geographic for a year and a half. Every month I would send my resume in, again, asking for a job, never heard back. And then I was at a party with a friend, and he had another friend who was really obnoxious. He was one of those guys who's like, hi, how are you? Yeah, I know I'm good looking. And I was like, oh my gosh, madre mia. And so we were talking, and he was like asking what I was interested in. I'm like, oh, I'd really like to work at National Geographic. And he's like, I can get you a job there. I'm like, yeah. But you know what? I was nice to him. I gave him my resume, and you know what he did? He got me a job there because he knew someone who ran a program that was bringing in temporary workers, where you went where they needed temporary help, and then they would actually hire from this temporary pool. So I had no idea how the system worked, but you needed someone to get you into the temporary pool. So lesson learned, the guys who you think might be jerks, keep them at an arm's distance, but be friends, because they might be helpful. Lesson number 1 for me. So from there, I was able to make connections and to figure out how to follow this path into a PhD program. And I was very, very fortunate that I went to a graduate program to work with this man, Alan Walker, at this really boring-looking building at Penn State University, which took me back. I spent my whole childhood trying to leave coal mining country, but I ended up back in coal mining country to go to this university because when I met him, he believed in me. And he never, I don't know if the word, so he never coddled me. He never gave me lots of compliments. He was never holding my hand and helping me with every step, because he expected me to be able to do big things and good things. It was like, of course you can do that. Go do that. Why would you second guess yourself? Go. And that was fabulous. So I went to work with him. One of the most important decisions I made in my career was to have a mentor who was very supportive and believed in me all the way. So Alan was one of my first mentors. He's also the first person who sent me to do field work. I worked in Kenya on a field project of his, which really helped solidify in my mind that field work was what I wanted to do. So the next thing that I recommend you do is ask for opportunities. So for me, I was always like, oh, if I do hard work, if I'm polite, if I'm nice, people will offer me things. This is not how it usually works in science, and this is not how it works in academics and in research. Ask for opportunities. So I mustered up a lot of courage, and I asked Burhani Asfal, Jonas Bani, Gide Wolde Gabriel, and Tim White if I could go to the field with them in Ethiopia, because I really wanted to be a paleontologist working in the field. And they were running a huge project in Ethiopia. And I asked them, and they said yes. And so I went. And it was a fantastic experience. Here is one of the only other women in the field camp, Esa Alema, one of the local Afars, for many of the first years I was working there. You might start noticing that many of the people that I have interfaced with at the start of my career are men, but there are a handful of women. Even if they weren't scientists, they were really helpful. So the other thing is I mustered up the courage, gathered my courage, and I asked Ken Weiss and Michael Mahaney if I could do some quantitative genetic analyses at a biomedical research center in Texas. And this was where I would be able to do the quantitative genetic analyses. And they said yes. And I was scared because I had enough courage to ask, but then when they said yes, then I had to have the courage to do the work. And it was scary for me because it was new. So my other piece of advice is don't be afraid to do things, even if they make you a little scared and a little intimidated. That's where you should venture out into the area where you are a little intellectually uncomfortable. So, for example, in the field, one of the things I did that I'm really grateful for relates to cars. So these are the kinds of vehicles that we drive in the field, because you can drive off-road, but they're trucks, and they're hard to drive, and they're manual shift. I know which is normal here in Spain, but in the United States, not everyone knows how to drive a manual shift car. But I did, because luckily I grew up in a part of the country where you needed to do that. And so one day, I usually was sitting in the back. Most of the team sits in the back of the trucks. But we were about to leave the field, and one of the drivers was sick and couldn't drive. And so they were down, they were missing a driver. And so someone turned to me and said, "You wouldn't happen to know how to drive a stick shift car, do you?" And I'm like, yes, I do. And so then I moved from the back towards the front, and instantaneously I became very important in the project because not only could I help with the field work and the fossils and cleaning fossils and carrying bags, I could drive the cars. And this opened up a lot of opportunities. So don't be afraid. It was scary the first time I drove, many times I drove, but that going into the uncomfortable zone really paid off in many ways. Also, intellectually, like I said, I was not thinking I was going into science. I had not had all that much math, but I needed the math for the genetics research. And so I had to go into an intellectually uncomfortable zone as well for this work, and to start working with analytical methods such as this. I also had to look at the dentitions of over 600 baboons for the quantitative genetics research. And have you been to the dentist and had your teeth, they make a mold of your teeth to make a replica? I had to do this for the baboons. So I had to figure out how to do it, and then I had to do it. And I had to be the expert. So I will never forget when we go and there's all these much older men around and me and a baboon on the table, anesthetized. And my hands were shaking so much, like, I can do this. But I did do it, and it does not make me nervous anymore. So taking your opportunities and looking for your opportunities when they come. One day, when I was working in the cages with the baboons for the genetics research, I met this guy, Steve Lee, and he was a professor at another university. I was still a graduate student, but he was studying the same animals. And so I was like, would you like to study the animals while my research has anesthetized them? And he's like, yes. And so we got to talking and got to know each other. And then the next year, he was the chair of a committee searching for a new professor in his department at the same time I finished my PhD. So he gave me my first job, which you could say was helped by the fact that we shared monkeys in the past. So always making connections. And you look confused, shared monkeys. I had anesthetized them, and he studied them too. And so we were able to be collegial, and it worked out really well. But the other thing is, you can have a lot of luck, like I have had. You can look for your luck, like I have. But you also have to work really hard. And so that's working hard in the field to make the extra effort, working hard in the lab to make the extra effort. I hope that someday in the future, women won't need to work harder than men. But for now, I do think that we do still have to do 150% in order to be seen as doing 100% compared to men. There's still a bias, so you have to work hard and have the good luck too, so you can take advantage of the opportunities and the good luck when they come. But that hard work buys you opportunities as well. So because I had worked in the field, because I could drive, this man here, Stan Ambrose, offered me an opportunity to work on a 6 million-year-old fossil site in southern Kenya. So this was my first field team, and we worked there for about 4 years. And it was because he had seen me work really hard in Ethiopia that he felt like he could trust me. And this was a fantastic opportunity. But with that said, don't be afraid of change, because as I was building all of these relationships, these new jobs, the fieldwork in Kenya, I also realized that it wasn't the best situation. So for example, that man, Stan Ambrose, he was really hard to work with. And so I didn't want to work with him anymore, but leaving a fossil site is hard. So you have to sometimes make changes that feel a little scary in order to have the next level of opportunity. So 2 things changed for me. I moved from a job I had here out to California to work at the University of California, Berkeley, because I'd have more opportunity to work in genetics and also more opportunity to work with some other colleagues. So I had been working in Kenya, and I started a new project with a colleague in Tanzania with that same thing. So 2 big changes at the same time. And then Jackson and Zhao became this next really important person in my life. He's been a really important collaborator in our fieldwork for many years. So we started co-directing a project looking for new fossil sites and new archaeology sites all over Tanzania. And so our survey project, we had a very small crew in the first year. It was quite an adventure to get to places with our beat-up cars, but this gives you a sense of our survey areas that we were able to check in that year. We built our team a little bit bigger and found some more sites and more survey areas. But then with all of that too, Jackson and I went back to Olduvai Gorge, which is, if you know a little bit about human evolution, before Atapuerca became well known, Olduvai Gorge was seen as one of the most important paleoanthropology sites in the world. Atapuerca is way better, but Olduvai is still it has historically a very important place in the science. And so Jackson and I started working at Olduvai and running a project there which again is another opportunity of step out of your comfort zone because it was much bigger than anything I had worked on before. But also an incredible opportunity. So more of what Olduvai looks like. But from Olduvai, I want to tell you a story. And I'm going to tell you a story I have never told anyone. I have never actually felt like I could. So when you make a mistake, you have to figure out how to just get over it. Because you will make mistakes, and if you let them crush you, you can't keep moving forward. So one of the things I did is at Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania, we found this beautiful fossil. And so this is what it looks like. We cleared it all off. Any ideas what animal this is? This is the lower jaw, and so these are teeth. So it's very big. It has a nose like this. Elephant. Elefante. Exactly. A beautiful elephant from about 1.5 million years ago. So we needed to take this back to the museum. Beautiful, beautiful. So you put plaster around on top of it to secure it. And the whole idea is that as you're doing this, you then dig around it and secure it. And then you start to dig from underneath it. And the whole idea is we were going to flip it over. As I'm explaining, we're going to flip it over. And here we go. We're about to flip it over. It's flipping over. It's almost over. There it goes. Oh. Because what you might not really notice is there's a whole bunch of fossil fragments, little pieces of that mandible all over here. It broke apart into thousands of pieces instead of staying intact when we flipped it over. I still feel awful because it was my fault because I was overseeing that. But you know, what are you going to do? Quit? Walk away? Like, okay, I'm done. One elephant broken and I'm over. Well, I haven't had the courage to go back and try to fix the elephant, but we took all the pieces. They are waiting for me in the museum in Tanzania. One day I will fix it, but you move on. So you have to figure out how to accept that you've made a mistake. It's okay. You learn from it and you move on. The other thing is you need to have patience. So from fieldwork back in about 2004, we found these bones here. These are the scattered bones of a monkey from about 150,000 years ago. And so just absolutely beautiful. These sites in this area had hundreds and hundreds of these monkeys. So this is like 2004. It wasn't until about 2017 that I had the funding and that I had people who could work with me to go to the museum to work on all of those specimens. But it took us a long time. We went back in 2000 and I think it was 16 or 17, and then we were back in 2019. I took another team with more people to work on this huge collection. And those fossils weren't published until 2 weeks ago. So science can take a very long time. Science is like running a marathon. It's not a sprint. And so as you think about a career in science or in engineering or mathematics, is that there will be some projects that happen quickly, but you need to pace yourself for the long run. And so make sure that you have breaks, make sure that you do the things to take care of yourself so that you can make the whole marathon and not just the first mile. So over the years, I have had wonderful people at my side. I have a partner. My husband is actually another academic, and we were at the same university, which was really nice. I built a fabulous research group in my lab in Berkeley. Really good people. And the people around you are the ones that give you the inspiration to keep going, that I really enjoy problem solving with other people and doing it as a group. So something else I recommend is finding people that you really like to work with and that make you think bigger thoughts and go into those intellectual uncomfort zones where you'll come up with new ideas. But it's not always where you need to be. So I was at Berkeley for about 17 years, and I realized that where I was all it would ever be, which was okay, but I still wanted to do more. I felt like I had more in my head, more ideas, more energy to do more science and things I couldn't do there. And at the time, Maria Martinez Torres and Jose Maria Bermudez de Castro, they are two of the most famous and most important dental anthropologists in the world. They offered a position at CENIEH for a dental anthropologist. And I'm sort of a dental anthropologist. I mean, I'm not them, but I study teeth. So I took the opportunity and I asked. I wrote to Maria, the director of CENIEH, and I just said, "Are you interested in older people for this job?" And she wrote back and said, "Well, we didn't think anyone would apply, but, who's more senior, but yes." So I applied. It was scary. I had figured out how to be an adult in California. I had a life. I had had a family, but I really felt like I needed more. So I asked, I went into something, even though I was a little bit scared, and applied for the position, and they hired me. Yay! And now I'm here. And it's wonderful because one of the things, so Jose Maria was the only person who did not think I was crazy to want to apply for the ERC grant when I first came. So he reminds me of Alan Walker, my PhD advisor, who is like, "Sure, why can't you do that? You can do that, go, of course you can do that." He has been like that for me, which I really appreciate. And the other thing, Maria Martinez Torres, she's the director of CENIEH. This is the first time I have had a woman who is my boss and my mentor, and it feels so nice. It's really wonderful. She's a wonderful director, and it means a lot to me to finally be at a place where I have so many more women to work with. So I, again, embraced change from here all the way over to here, and hopefully I will be back soon working in the field in Africa as well. But I moved my family to Burgos a year and a half ago. It's been really nice. I have now, with the grant, growing my research team, and some of my compañeros, or compañeras, are here today supporting me, which is lovely. And also, I have done things I'm afraid of. So I moved, and a couple of weeks ago, I gave my first presentation in Spanish, which was really scary. But many thank you for the help and support. And also, though, I mentioned before this is a marathon, and you have to figure out how to make it through the marathon. So I highly recommend you have your career, and you think of your science or your engineering or your mathematics or your pursuits in technology, but have other things too, because it will not always be good, and you need friends and you need family, so that when one is not good, the others can hold you up. So one of the best decisions, one of the best things that ever happened to me was having my daughter, because she has been by my side through the last 11 years and always been the yin to the yang of the science in my life and bringing balance. So when one is easy, the other is hard, and when they're both good, it's very, very good. So many thanks to my daughter, who is here with me today too. And as you can see, she does not actually like paleontology. And with that, I would love to answer questions or add more. So. Or maybe I could ask you questions. So, does anyone have a story of when you've been afraid, but you tried something anyway to share with everyone? Or something that was outside of your comfort? Who has a mentor that has been really important to them? And do you want to give them, yes, and give them some credit? Share with us.
So I have a mentor thanks to STEM. She's called Michela Campagna, and she is a biologist too. She works at Janssen, and she's like in the department of the investigating part. And thanks to her, I discovered I discovered biotechnology. That was like a career that I didn't know. And I was like a little bit afraid because of the word technology, because me and technology, like, we don't catch up a lot. So I discovered that I love investigating, and now I want to like investigate thanks to her. And she's like really supportive, and she's like encouraging me always to discover new things and don't stop believing in me, and I'm very grateful to her.
How did you meet her?
I meet her like thanks to this program, and because I'm in the part of Mentor Woman, where you choose like a mentor. And we are starting last year to have like conferences via online, and we meet like 1 or twice a month. And it's one of the most wonderful experiences that I have in my life, and I'm very happy with that.
That makes me so happy. Yay!
Thank you.
Anyone else have a? Oh, wonderful. Here, you want me to?
I wanted to ask you, what career did you study?
What career did I study? Yeah. So when I went to college, I first majored in drama, in theater. But I was not very good at it. So I realized quickly that I should find another career path. and was taking so in the United States, you are expected in university to take about 10 classes that sample from different topics and disciplines. And so I took a class to fulfill one of those requirements in anthropology, and I fell in love. But it's similar because in theater and when you're an actor, you are trying to figure out what is like an essential about a person. And so I can see where I have done the same thing, but using science. And so using biology to find out kind of essentialness of humanity. What is the biological essentiality? Is that a word in English? And so anyway, yeah, theater. But then I ended up majoring in anthropology and archaeology.
Okay, I have also a question about genetics. And I've heard that every cell in your body have the same genes. That's something to do with the length. My father told me that some parts of the gene activated depending on which part of the body is. And that's something to do with that, because if the part of the body in charge of growing, or the gene or something, I don't know how exactly to express this, but it has something to do with the length you said before at the beginning.
Exactly, yeah. So your father is absolutely right. Every cell has exactly the same, your whole complete genome. And one of the most fascinating things to me about developmental biology is understanding how you take these, the genes, and you make an organism, and it's this very elegant and complex turning on and turning off of different genes and expressing them at different levels, at different times in development. So this concept where if you have one genetic mutation, that it has an effect on multiple parts of the body, it's a concept called pleiotropy. And it's exactly because all of the anatomical parts that are developing at that specific time when that gene is being turned on or being expressed a lot, that they're all developing at that time. And so what it's telling us with the molars is that when they are being established, the number and the size of the molars, that it's really early in embryological development, and around the time then that you have brain development happening and that you have a number of other things happening, but so early in that gestational development, so they're all related at the same time period, they're happening at the same time, and so the genes being expressed are influencing at the same time. Yeah, developmental genetics is such a fascinating research area too. In my next life, I might do that. So I have a cough drop. Would you like this? It's like a cough drop. I was afraid I would need it, but I think you need it more. So anyone else have a good story where you took advantage of an opportunity to share and inspire? I find it really helpful to hear what other people have done, because then you're more easily you can see when you're in the same situation. You're like, this is my chance, or just to be inspired to take that chance. More stories to share? No? What other questions should we ask? Más.
¿Alguna pregunta más? ¿Nada? ¿Ya? ¿Nada por aquí? ¿Nada por allá? Bueno, pues, thank you very much.
Enhorabuena.
Gracias.
My pleasure. Un placer. Gracias a ti.